Have you ever had a moment that split your life into a before and an after? My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how one unexpected fall changed the entire direction of my life. I hope wherever you are right now, whether you're sitting at your kitchen table scrolling on your phone or listening on your way to work, that you find a piece of yourself in these next few minutes. Because what happened to me might not just be my story. Maybe in some way it's yours too. It started with a golden Ohio afternoon, the kind where the sun feels like it's shining just for you. I was 17 running the race I had trained for all year, heart-pounding dreams, bigger than the stadium that held them. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not school, not worries, not even the ache in my legs. All I could see was the finish line and the future that was waiting on the other side. Sometimes you believe so fiercely in a dream that you forget how fragile everything can be. And then in the space between one stride and the next, my world shifted. A sharp crack, a tumble, the sudden crushing pain that let me know something was very wrong. I lay on that track with the roar of the crowd fading into silence, surrounded by strangers, while my own heartbeat sounded louder than the stadium. I remember thinking, this isn't how it was supposed to end. Not here, not like this. When the medics lifted me onto the stretcher, I kept looking for a familiar face in the sea of people desperate for comfort. Have you ever reached for someone just needing them to show up and realized in that hardest moment that you were truly alone? That was the day I learned how much it hurts when the people you need most aren't there. The ambulance ride, the cold hospital room, the questions from doctors I'd never met. Through it all, I told myself, it's okay, they'll come, they have to. But when my phone finally buzzed, all I found was a voicemail from my mom. We can't make it today, your brother's big game. You'll be fine, you've always been so strong. Maybe you know that feeling, the one where your pain is invisible to the people who matter most. Where you wonder if anyone would notice if you just disappeared for a while. In that hospital bed, I started to realize that sometimes growing up doesn't happen slowly. Sometimes it happens in a single silent moment, when you're forced to face the world alone. But this isn't a story about bitterness. It's about what happens after the world goes quiet, about finding hope in unexpected places, and discovering the strength that comes from standing up even when you have to do it on your own. Because the truth is, the worst moments in our lives aren't always the end. Sometimes they're just the beginning of something we never could have imagined. So if you've ever felt invisible, forgotten, or left behind, I invite you to stay with me. Because the journey that started with a broken leg and a quiet hospital room became something so much bigger. Together, let's find out what happens when you turn pain into purpose and build a life you're proud to call your own. Some moments change you not because they last, but because they end everything that came before. For me, it was the regional finals on a golden October day. The stadium was buzzing with cheers and the smell of popcorn, and the announcer's voice echoed my name across the field. I had trained every morning before school, running laps in the half-light while the town slept. Every sprint, every aching muscle, every mile was for this one shot at the scholarship that would open the world. My parents promised they'd come, but I didn't see them in the stands. Still, I told myself, they'll be proud when I win. When the starting gun fired, everything else faded away. I focused on my breath, the rhythm of my shoes hitting the track, the finish line calling to me like a promise. I felt strong, invincible almost. Then suddenly, I didn't. Halfway through my final lap, something sharp tore through my left leg. I heard a sickening snap before I felt the pain, and I went down hard. The crowd gasped, but it was like I was underwater, everything muffled except for the ringing in my ears. In that moment, time slowed. All my dreams, all my hopes for a different life seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. The pain was blinding, but the embarrassment cut even deeper. I remember lying on the track, staring up at the wide sky, wishing I could just disappear. Coaches rushed over, someone called for an ambulance, and I was wheeled away before I ever got to finish my race. People talk about public failure as if it's something you can shake off, but when your dreams unravel in front of everyone, it leaves a mark. That mark doesn't just fade with the bruises. It lingers in the questions you ask yourself. Was I ever really good enough, and what will everyone think of me now? The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights, sirens, and the sting of tears I tried to hide. I kept hoping my parents would be waiting when we pulled up to the ER, maybe frantic, worried, ready to wrap me in a hug. Instead, I was greeted by strangers in scrubs and a nurse named Helen, who held my hand as they set my leg. She asked if I wanted to call someone, and I dialed my mom, but the call went to voicemail. I tried my dad. No answer. It felt like my world had gotten both smaller and heavier in a single afternoon. Lying alone in that sterile hospital room, I replayed the race in my mind, every step, every second, the moment things went wrong. But I also started to notice something else, a tiny voice inside me, quieter than the self-doubt, saying, "You survived." It wasn't the finish I'd imagined, but I was still here. Sometimes we're taught that success is only about winning, about crossing the line first and hearing the cheers. But real life isn't always like that. Sometimes surviving the fall is the first step in learning what you're truly made of. The lesson I began to learn, though, it would take years to fully understand, is that falling, especially in front of everyone, isn't the end. It's a beginning you never saw coming. That afternoon on the track, everything I thought I needed was stripped away. All that was left was me, raw, hurt, and alone, but still breathing. In a way, losing that race forced me to ask myself, who am I if I'm not the girl with the gold medal? It's a question that would echo through the days and nights that followed. That's where the story really starts, not with the fall, but with what comes after. Because what I didn't realize as I stared up at those hospital ceiling tiles was that sometimes the most powerful journeys begin when we have nothing left but ourselves. In the next part, I'll share what it felt like to reach out for help and find sometimes that the people you expect to catch you just aren't there. You never really understand what loneliness is until you're surrounded by people and still feel completely unseen. In the hospital, nurses came and went with quiet efficiency, checking monitors, adjusting pillows, offering polite smiles. Their kindness mattered, but none of them knew the shape of my life before that day, or how badly I wanted a familiar hand to hold. I kept glancing at the door, expecting to see my mom or dad rush in. Maybe breathless and worried, maybe apologizing for being late. But the minutes slipped into hours, and the only calls I got were from the billing department asking about my insurance. I remember listening to the patient in the next bed. She was older, maybe in her 70s, and her daughter sat beside her telling stories, brushing her hair, laughing gently at old memories. Their voices drifted through the curtains, sometimes so soft I couldn't catch the words, but I could hear the love in them. I found myself wishing for a moment like that, just a simple sign that I mattered enough for someone to stay. Instead, my phone sat silent. When it finally buzzed, it was a message from my mom. "Your brother's game went late. We'll come tomorrow if we can. Love you." It should have felt comforting, but it only made the ache sharper. I started to replay all the small ways I'd felt invisible over the years. There were birthdays when the cake was for my little brother, and my card got signed as an afterthought. There were school plays when the loudest applause was always for someone else's kid. I'd always told myself it didn't matter, that being strong meant never asking for more. But now, staring at my bandaged leg and the cold tile floor, I wondered if maybe I'd been wrong all along. Maybe the strongest thing you can do is admit you need people and notice when they aren't there. The hours stretched on, turning into a long, lonely night. The nurse Helen, with her soft eyes and practical hands, offered to call someone for me again. This time, I gave her the number for my neighbor, Mrs. Carter. She answered on the first ring and promised she'd be there in the morning. As the sky outside faded from gold to midnight blue, I realized how much comfort there was in simply knowing someone would show up even if they weren't family. It made me rethink what support really means. So many of us believe support must come from those closest by blood, but sometimes it arrives from the most unexpected places. I learned that night that love isn't always about genetics. It's about who steps up when it counts. Mrs. Carter wasn't related to me, but she'd always been there with a smile, a plate of cookies, or an extra umbrella on rainy days. Now she would be the one to help me through the hardest season of my life. That realization was bittersweet, comforting, and sad all at once. The first morning after surgery, Mrs. Carter arrived just after sunrise. She brought chamomile tea and sat beside my bed, reading aloud from a battered mystery novel. while I drifted in and out of sleep. It wasn't the dramatic rescue I'd imagined, but it was steady, gentle, and real. Sometimes all we need is one person willing to be there, even if they don't have all the answers. In those quiet hours, I started to let go of the belief that only family could make me whole. If there's a lesson I carried forward from those early days, it's that loneliness doesn't always mean being alone. It means feeling unseen, and sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we never expected. Accepting help, especially from someone outside your family, isn't a sign of weakness. It's a new kind of strength, one built on openness and trust. As my hospital stay turned into weeks and then into long days of slow recovery at home, I would learn just how much small kindnesses matter. But I would also have to face the reality that healing the body is only half the battle. The mind and the heart need their own kind of medicine. In the next part, I'll share what it was like to rebuild not just my leg, but my sense of self-worth when the world seemed determined to forget me. Physical healing is rarely as simple as the doctors make it sound. They set your bones, hand you a schedule of exercises, and tell you to rest. What they don't say is how long the nights can feel when pain keeps you awake, or how heavy a pair of crutches becomes after the 10th trip across the living room. In the beginning, every small task felt monumental. Getting out of bed took courage. Showering, brushing my hair, making a cup of tea, all required planning, patience, and more humility than I wanted to admit. There were days I wanted to hide from it all. Sometimes I would stare at my reflection, trying to see the girl I once was, the athlete, the dreamer, the girl who believed she could outrun disappointment. But my body didn't feel like mine anymore. I'd lost muscle confidence and a sense of control. Mrs. Carter became my lifeline, coming by each morning with her gentle smile and a thermos of soup. She cheered every tiny victory, a few steps farther, a shower without help, a trip to the mailbox and back. Those moments were ordinary, yet they felt like quiet revolutions. Real recovery, I learned, isn't just physical. There's the invisible ache, the way doubt and isolation seep into your bones, making every setback feel personal. I remember the first time I fell during a home exercise, twisting awkwardly and landing hard. Tears came, but not just from pain. Frustration and embarrassment mingled together, and for a moment I just lay on the carpet, letting the world pass by. No one was there to see, and maybe that made it easier to cry. It's in those moments alone with our struggles that we start to ask the hard questions. Why bother? What's the point? Will things ever get better? If I'm honest, there were nights when I almost believed I'd never be whole again. My parents' calls remained brief, mostly updates about my brother's games or family errands. You'll bounce back, they'd say, as if it were just that easy. But each day the distance between us grew wider. It's a peculiar thing feeling lonely in your own home. The silence between their words echoed louder than any stadium cheer I'd ever known. But even in that quiet, a kind of stubbornness grew. I started keeping a journal, tracking my progress, and writing down every accomplishment, no matter how small. I wrote about the pain, the frustration, and slowly the pride that crept in, when I realized I was doing this for myself, not for anyone else. One night, after limping painfully to the porch alone, I watched the sun sink behind the trees and wrote, "I am still here. I am more than what I've lost." Those words became a lifeline, reminding me that healing the mind was as crucial as healing the body. Looking back, I wish I'd understood sooner that recovery is rarely a straight line. It's a series of stumbles and starts of setbacks and unexpected breakthroughs. There's no medal for getting out of bed on your hardest days, but sometimes those are the victories that matter most. If you're ever in a season like that where every step forward feels uncertain, remember progress is rarely loud. Often it's the quiet persistence that shapes us. As the weeks blurred into months, I came to see that healing isn't just about mending what's broken. It's about discovering new strengths, redefining what it means to move forward, even when you're limping. But as I began to find my footing, a new question took root. Was I healing or just hiding? And could I ever step out of the shadows, cast by my family's indifference? In the next part, I'll explore what it means to be the forgotten sibling, and how living in someone else's shadow can change you in ways both subtle and profound. Growing up in the Mitchell family, the center of attention was always my little brother Alex. He was our town's golden boy, the kind of kid whose soccer trophies filled up the entire mantle and whose smile made neighbors stop and gush at the grocery store. My parents beamed with pride at every game, recording his every goal and sharing highlights on social media with captions like, "So proud of our star." Meanwhile, I often stood on the sidelines, clapping quietly, happy for him, but wishing just once that someone might turn the camera my way. I didn't resent Alex. If anything, I admired his confidence and the effortless way he drew people in. But there's a particular ache that comes from always being the background character in your own family. When I was hurt, my absence barely made a ripple. No get well soon banners, no family group texts about my recovery. Instead, updates about Alex's latest tournament took center stage. I learned to be self-sufficient, to downplay my needs, to act unbothered when the world seemed to orbit around someone else. The hardest moments weren't always the big ones. Sometimes it was little things. My parents forgetting to sign my field trip forms, skipping my science fair to catch Alex's away game, or mixing up the details of my favorite book. The message was always the same. Alex came first, and there was only so much room for the rest of us. I tried not to let it sting, telling myself that being strong meant not needing recognition. But underneath a quiet longing grew the wish to be truly seen, not just tolerated. If you've ever felt like the invisible child, you know it's not about jealousy. It's about the slow erosion of your sense of belonging. You learn to measure your worth by the attention you don't receive, and after a while, you stop asking for it altogether. I watched as Alex's victories became the family's identity. My parents wore his team colors to church-skipped holidays for his playoff games, and even joked with friends that Sarah's our independent one, she doesn't need us. I smiled along, never admitting how deeply those words landed. In moments of honesty, I wondered if I would ever be enough, if there was a version of myself that could outshine the shadow I lived in. I pushed myself at school, joined clubs, volunteered, even won a writing contest once. My name was called at an assembly, but my parents couldn't make it. They were at Alex's game. That's the reality for so many siblings. You can pour your heart into something, but it's hard to celebrate alone. Over time, I grew quieter about my own accomplishments, tucking them away like secrets. Looking back, I see how easy it is for parents, especially in busy families, to overlook the quieter children. They assume resilience means you don't need as much support, that independence is a sign of not caring. But sometimes the most self-sufficient kids are the ones who need affirmation the most. If you're a parent watching this, take it from someone who's been there. Showing up, even in small ways, matters more than you know. The lesson I learned in those years is this: your worth can't depend on who notices you. It has to come from within. I realized that waiting for someone else's spotlight would only keep me in the shadows. It took time and more than a little pain to start finding my own light. As I learned to step out from behind Alex's achievements, I also discovered something unexpected: the power of small kindnesses from unlikely places. In the next part, I'll share how a neighbor's gentle support taught me more about family than any trophy or headline ever could. In a world that often feels too busy to notice, it's surprising how deeply a single act of kindness can reach. During those difficult first weeks at home, when I still hobbled from couch to kitchen and slept with my leg propped up on pillows, it was Mrs. Carter, our neighbor from 2 doors down, who became my unexpected lifeline. She was retired with silvery hair, always in a neat bun, and a laugh that could fill a room. Despite her own aches and stories of missing her daughter, who lived out of state, she made it a habit to check in on me every morning, armed with homemade soup or a mystery novel she thought I'd like. At first, I tried to be polite but distant. I didn't want anyone to see how much I struggled, not after years of learning to be self-sufficient. But Mrs. Carter had a way of quietly showing up, never asking too many questions, never pitying me. She would help me shuffle to the porch for fresh air or make tea and let me sit in silence when I was tired. I began to realize that care didn't always come from those you expected. Sometimes the softest touch arrives from someone who simply decides to be there. There was one afternoon after a particularly tough physical therapy session when everything felt like too much. The pain, the loneliness, the feeling of being left behind, it pressed on my chest, until I could hardly breathe. Mrs. Carter found me like that, eyes red and hands clenched. She didn't try to fix it or offer empty reassurances. Instead, she sat beside me, handed me a handkerchief, and said, "You don't have to do this alone, Sarah." It was the first time in weeks I felt my heart unclench just a little. Her words were simple, but they landed like a soft place to fall. As the days passed, I grew to look forward to her visits. She shared stories about her late husband, about learning to be brave when the world changed without warning. Sometimes she talked about her garden or showed me old photographs of her own childhood. In those quiet, ordinary moments, I felt seen in a way I hadn't for a long time. Her kindness wasn't grand or flashy, it was steady, patient, and real. The world didn't suddenly become easier, but it felt less lonely knowing someone genuinely cared. It's funny looking back how I almost missed the gifts she offered by keeping my guard up. We often expect help to come from family or wait for a grand gesture, overlooking the steady presence of those around us. Mrs. Carter taught me that support can be as simple as sitting together on a chilly porch saying nothing at all. Her presence became proof that sometimes family isn't about shared blood, but shared moments of understanding. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Don't be afraid to accept help when it's offered, even if it comes from an unexpected place. Kindness, no matter how small, can be the anchor you need when the tides feel rough. We don't have to carry every burden alone, and sometimes letting someone in can be the first real step toward healing. As I slowly gained strength, learning to trust both my body and the people who cared for me, a new idea began to take root. Maybe I could use my experience, the pain, and the recovery to help others one day. In the next part, I'll share how I found a new sense of purpose and started to dream again, this time on my own terms. Once the pain in my leg dulled enough for me to move around the house alone, I started to wonder what my life could look like after recovery. There's a strange space that opens up when a dream dies. You're left with emptiness, but also a blank page. For a while, I tried to fill that space with old routines, scrolling through classmates' college acceptances, helping Mrs. Carter water her garden, or reading library books I never had time for before. Yet I felt restless, as if something inside me was waiting to be rebuilt. I realized I didn't want to simply move past my accident. I wanted to move forward carrying the lessons, not just the scars. It was during a session with my physical therapist, a woman named Dr. Lopez, that a new idea began to take root. She was patient and encouraging, explaining every stretch, every milestone, and never letting me forget that progress wasn't always measured in leaps, but in careful, persistent steps. I asked her about her work, why she chose it, what kept her going through tough days. She told me every time someone stands again after being knocked down, I feel hope. I get to witness people rebuild their lives. That conversation stayed with me, replaying in my mind on nights when self-doubt crept in. Soon after, I started reading more about physical therapy, not just the exercises, but the stories of those who found healing through movement and the professionals who guided them. I realized my own journey wasn't just about recovery. It was about understanding, about empathy. My struggles and setbacks suddenly felt less like failures and more like a map charting a way forward. Maybe I could help others find hope the way Dr. Lopez helped me. The thought sparked a quiet excitement, the first flicker of purpose I'd felt since before my injury. Still, choosing a new path wasn't easy. My parents expected me to follow a more traditional route, something safe, predictable, or even connected to Alex's world of sports. Some friends questioned my choice, wondering why I wouldn't just focus on getting better, or maybe pick something easier. There were moments I doubted myself, too, caught between pleasing others and following my gut. But deep down, I knew the only way to truly heal was to honor what I'd learned, that pain, if you let it, can be transformed into purpose. One day, I gathered the courage to tell my family that I wanted to study physical therapy. My parents didn't understand at first. They thought I was just being sentimental or rebellious. Alex shrugged, more concerned with his training schedule than my plans, but I was used to being overlooked. This time, I stood firm, not for recognition, but for the chance to build something meaningful for myself and hopefully for others. Quietly, I began researching colleges' scholarships and writing application essays that told my story honestly. The lesson I learned during this turning point was simple but powerful. What you go through can become what you give to the world. Pain is never wasted if you use it to lift someone else. It was Mrs. Carter who reminded me. Sometimes the road you never meant to walk is the one that leads you home. Her words gave me courage to keep going, even when the path felt uncertain. As I took my first steps toward a new dream, I also found new strength in my independence. The journey ahead would be filled with obstacles, late nights studying financial worries, and lingering aches from my injury, but for the first time, I felt a sense of ownership over my story. In the next part, I'll share what it was like to begin college life on my own terms, learning that hard work and hidden victories can shine brighter than any spotlight. Starting college was nothing like the glossy brochures promised. My dorm was cramped and smelled faintly of old coffee and instant noodles. My 3 roommates were strangers with their own routines and histories, their laughter echoing through the thin walls late into the night. While others seemed to move through campus with confidence, I felt awkward, my limp, a quiet reminder of where I'd been and what I'd lost. I spent those first weeks shuffling between classes, physical therapy sessions, and my part-time job at the campus smoothie bar. Each day blurred into the next, but I clung to the independence I'd fought so hard to earn. Most evenings after my shift, I'd sit alone in the library surrounded by the soft hum of laptops and whispered study groups. My friends from home sent photos of football games and family dinners, and sometimes I ached for their ease. But I also took pride in the small victories navigating campus on my own, getting a good grade on a tough exam, managing my budget down to the last dollar. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I celebrated quietly, buying myself a cheap bouquet at the grocery store whenever I hit a milestone, no matter how small. My physical recovery continued too, but it was slow. Some mornings my leg ached so badly that it took real grit just to get out of bed. Other times I'd watch student athletes jog past and feel a sting of envy remembering how I once moved so freely. I learned to forgive my body's new limits, treating each step not as a setback, but as proof that I was still moving forward. I met others in physical therapy students, veterans, even a retired teacher, each with their own battles, each carrying unseen burdens. Their resilience inspired me and reminded me that everyone has scars, even if you can't see them. One day, while assisting in the campus clinic, I met a patient named Mr. Hanley, a grandfatherly figure recovering from a hip replacement. He grumbled through every exercise, joking that he'd rather be fishing, but he always showed up rain or shine. We began to share stories, his of raising kids and fixing up old cars, mine of coming back from injury. Helping him celebrate his progress, no matter how small, made me realize just how much purpose I found in this work. Sometimes lifting someone else's spirits helped me lift my own. The lesson college taught me wasn't just about anatomy or kinesiology. It was about perseverance, about putting in the work even when no one is watching, and finding pride in what others might overlook. I learned to appreciate hidden victories a semester passed, without falling behind a friend made over late-night ramen, a patient's smile after a hard day. Those small wins became the threads that stitched my confidence back together. As the seasons changed, so did I. My world grew larger, not because it was suddenly easier, but because I refused to shrink myself to fit old expectations. I no longer needed the spotlight. I simply needed to know that I was doing my best. Still, the distance from my family remained. We spoke rarely, and when we did, it was mostly polite updates and careful silences. But as I continued to grow, I realized that recognition from others, even family, couldn't define me anymore. With each step, I felt myself becoming more rooted, more certain that the path I'd chosen, while rough and often lonely, was worth every hardship. In the next part, I'll share what happened when my hard work finally began to pay off, and how recognition and old wounds collided in unexpected ways. Recognition doesn't always arrive the way you expect. In my 3rd year, after countless hours of study and hands-on practice, I was nominated for a campus award for my research on injury recovery and mental health. When my professor called to tell me, I felt a rush of pride, a thrill I hadn't felt since before my accident. For the first time, my hard work was visible to more than just myself. The award came with a small ceremony, a write-up in the student paper, and unexpectedly the first congratulatory email from my parents in months. "We heard the news from your aunt. Congratulations," my mother wrote, adding, "You make us proud." The words should have warmed me, but instead I felt the old ache of being noticed only when others were watching. I tried to respond graciously, but I couldn't shake the sense of distance. Our family phone calls were still rare and brief, focused more on my brother's upcoming championships or my father's work travel than on my daily life. I realized painfully that I still hoped for their attention even after everything. But their praise felt hollow, like a spotlight that flickered on only after the crowd had already started clapping. I wondered if I'd ever stop craving their approval or if every success would feel incomplete without it. Meanwhile, the recognition brought new challenges. Suddenly, classmates and professors I barely knew wanted to talk or collaborate. A few old friends from high school messaged as if my award had given me a new kind of worth. At first, I struggled with imposter syndrome, wondering if I truly belonged in these circles, if my voice mattered as much as everyone said. But when I met other students who shared stories of invisible battles of being overlooked, underestimated, or misunderstood, I felt a new kind of kinship. I wasn't the only one searching for belonging. One evening during a quiet walk across campus, my mom called unexpectedly. She talked about how the family had been so busy lately, apologized for missing out on my college journey, and said they hoped to visit sometime soon. I listened politely, caught between gratitude and resentment. I wanted to believe that things could change, that maybe now my parents saw me not just as the independent one, but as someone worth showing up for. But the years of distance couldn't be closed with a single conversation. As we hung up, I realized that waiting for a perfect apology or a sweeping gesture of love would only leave me disappointed. Through all of this, I learned a quiet truth: recognition from others, even from family, can't be the foundation of your self-worth. It's nice to be seen, but it's far more powerful to know yourself, to celebrate your own journey with or without a cheering section. My real reward wasn't the award or the applause, but the quiet certainty that I'd worked hard, persisted, and found purpose through pain. As I moved forward, the way I defined family began to shift. I found comfort in the friends who showed up when it mattered, in the patients whose progress brought me joy, in mentors like Dr. Lopez, and steady supporters like Mrs. Carter. And while I still hoped my parents would one day understand, I finally understood that love and acceptance sometimes grow from unexpected soil. But family ties have a way of looping back into your life sometimes when you least expect it. In the next part, I'll share how a sudden family crisis brought old wounds to the surface, and how forgiveness in the face of rejection became the hardest but most healing lesson of all. Family bonds are strange sometimes, fraying, sometimes stretching, but never quite breaking. Near the end of my senior year, everything changed when Alex, my younger brother, suffered a serious knee injury during the state soccer semifinals. For the first time, he faced the kind of uncertainty and pain that had shaped so much of my own journey. I heard the news through a cousin, and by that evening, my mother's number flashed across my phone. She sounded small, almost desperate. "Alex needs you. He trusts you more than anyone right now." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd longed for her to say those words. I visited home for the first time in months, unsure what to expect. Alex was quieter than usual, frustration etched in every movement as he hobbled through the living room on crutches. I recognized the haunted look in his eyes, the feeling of being left behind while everyone else moves on. I offered to help with his at-home exercises, guiding him gently through routines, encouraging him on the hard days. At first, our sessions were awkward, filled with silence and half-finished sentences. But slowly, something softened between us. He began sharing his fears about losing his place on the team, about not knowing who he'd be if he couldn't play. One afternoon, after a particularly rough session, Alex looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry, I never noticed how hard it was for you." His words cracked something open inside me. I realized how much pain we both carried, not just physical wounds, but the invisible scars of feeling unseen or misunderstood. For years, I'd assumed he lived under the golden spotlight, untouched by doubt. But in his struggle, I saw the pressure he felt to be perfect, to never let our parents down. In that moment, we weren't rivals or background characters. We were siblings, each learning how to heal in our own way. My parents, too, seemed changed by Alex's injury. My mother lingered at the door during therapy sometimes, asking gentle questions about my own recovery, sometimes just watching with worry in her eyes. My father apologized for missing so many milestones, his voice thick with regret. These conversations were tentative, halting, and awkward but real. They didn't erase the past, but they cracked open space for something new, the possibility of forgiveness. I learned that forgiveness isn't about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about acknowledging the pain, letting go of what can't be changed, and choosing to move forward anyway. Some wounds might never fully close, but compassion can knit together what anger only tears apart. Helping Alex regain his strength wasn't just about his leg, it was about both of us finding the courage to stand tall, even with our scars. That season at home taught me that everyone in a family, even the ones who seem strongest, carry burdens they rarely show. My parents would never be perfect, and neither would I. But through honest conversation and shared struggle, we found a new kind of closeness, one based not on perfect understanding, but on grace. As graduation approached, I reflected on how far we'd all come. The girl who once felt invisible was now the anchor for her family. I realized with quiet pride that healing doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it means forgiving others, sometimes forgiving ourselves, and always believing that a better chapter is possible. In the final part, I'll share how I found success on my own terms, and how building something meaningful from pain became my greatest legacy. Graduation day arrived with the same quiet golden light as the afternoon when everything first changed. I stood in my cap and gown feeling the weight of each step it took to reach that stage. Not just the miles walked, but every stumble, every lonely night, every silent victory along the way. My parents sat in the audience, and for the first time I wasn't searching for their approval. I felt complete not because I had finally made them proud, but because I'd learned to be proud of myself. The applause sounded different now, softer, deeper, like it was echoing from within. After college, I joined a team of therapists dedicated to bringing care to communities that rarely saw it. We traveled with a mobile clinic helping patients in rural towns recover from injuries or surgeries. Each day, I met people whose stories echoed my own resilience, shaped by pain, hope, carved out of hardship. Every patient reminded me that success isn't about shining brighter than someone else. It's about carrying your light into dark places, even when it flickers. The work was hard, the hours long, but each small breakthrough, each grateful smile became its own reward. Mrs. Carter came to visit the clinic once, watching me teach an elderly woman how to walk again after a bad fall. "I always knew you'd find your way," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Her faith in me had become a compass in my toughest days. My family, too, changed in ways I hadn't expected. We were never perfect sometimes, still stumbling over old hurts. But there was more laughter now, more patience, more willingness to listen. Forgiveness had made room for a different kind of closeness, one built on honesty and effort rather than appearances. Looking back, every moment of pain and invisibility became part of the foundation beneath my feet. The lessons I learned about small kindness, quiet courage, and the value of showing up guided me not only in my work but in my life. I realized that sometimes it's the journey you never wanted that leads you to the destination you needed most. My scars became reminders of the strength it took to heal, and my story, a way to help others believe in their own power to rebuild. If you've ever felt overlooked, forgotten, or left behind, I hope you carry this truth with you. Your value is not measured by who notices you, but by the quiet persistence with which you move forward. Let your hardships become stepping stones, not roadblocks. Turn your pain into purpose and share your light with others you never know whose life you might touch. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If my story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and hope. I'd love to hear your experiences, what moments shaped your path, what challenges you overcame. Let's keep building a community where every voice matters and no one has to walk their hardest roads alone.